Mac Power Users, episode 673, Apple's Freeform App. Hello, everyone. This is David Sparks. I am joined today by my friend and co-host, Mr. Stephen Hackett. How are you today, Stephen?
I'm good, David. Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year, everybody. I hope you all had a good holiday season. Maybe today, or I don't know, what do you do on New Year? Watch football, watch parades.
Yeah, eat some snacks.
Hang with some friends, recover from last night, whatever it is you're doing.
That's right.
I hope you're enjoying a little Mac Power Users to go along with that.
Yeah, and I think, unless something's on the schedule, I'm not sure of, I think we're the first relay show out for 2023 because we release on Sundays and New Year's is on a Sunday this year. So that's fun.
That is awesome. Yeah, we're starting it off right.
That's right. Yeah.
We're going to talk about that at the end today for more Power Users subscribers. We're going to talk about some of our New Year's kind of like planning and rituals we go through as we head into the new year each year. I think it'd be kind of fun. There's actually a tech bit of that for me, so I'm looking forward to talking about that. But yeah, we're all good. One other bit of housekeeping. A friend of mine, Chris Bailey, wrote a really good book called How to Calm Your Mind, just released a few days ago. And I've watched Chris go through the process of writing this book over the last 3 years, and it's just excellent. And I would recommend, as Mac Power Users listeners, if you want to give a fellow nerd some support, this is a book you should check out. It's about, the problems we talk about here sometimes, how, everything gets a little overwhelming, particularly with the tech, and ways to deal with that. And excellent book. If you do get it, give him an Amazon review. Give a fellow nerd some help.
Yeah, Chris is awesome. I always enjoy talking to him.
In fact, Chris is the guy who won that Apple hat when we did the live event. Remember, we did that live event in Chicago, and you bought a vintage Apple hat.
Yes.
And we said, well, who came from the farthest to be here? It's Chris Bailey.
Yeah, that was a fun time. That was great.
Yeah.
I got a little more housekeeping here at the top. So we have a moderator and an excellent community member, Kate. Kate, according to Connected, is the official Relay FM historian. They know like everything about Relay. When we do those co-founder quizzes between me and Mike, Kate is one of the people who provides questions and answers and does a lot of the research.
Yeah.
And they had given me a list of things they had come across when preparing the last co-founder quiz, which was part of the podcastathon back in September. And one of the things that needed fixing was we were missing a lot of guests in like really old MPU episodes, like well before MPU was on Relay, well before Relay FM was even a thing. And so I have gone through over the last couple of weeks and have been adding guests to our back catalog. So we'll use Chris Bailey as an example. I think he was fine, but say that he had been interviewed a long time ago. Maybe he hadn't been attached to like all of his episodes. So anyways, I went through and fixed all of that stuff. And so a big thank you to Kate for providing all those details. It was something that I had been meaning to do and kind of just like kept putting it off. And then they gave me this long list of like, hey, here are 200 MPU episodes that, don't have their guests associated with them. So a big thank you to Kate for that. And it was a really interesting for me because, for longtime listeners, I've only been on the show now, 4 years, 3 years, 4 years? Yeah. And MPU's a lot older than that. And I'd listened to MPU from the very beginning. And so it was really neat for me to like go through these old episodes. Like, man, some of the conversations and topics are so timely and so evergreen. Things that we're talking about today and things we have planned for this year. Some of that stuff, been talked about on the show for a long time. It was a fun trip down memory lane. And again, a big thank you to Kate for helping us out with that.
It's been an evolution. I remember somebody told me, because you and I had our ice cream social one day when we first became friends, and somebody said, oh, Steven wants to be on your show. He calls it his white whale. And then we got you on right away. But yeah, it's so funny. But
here we are.
Yeah, there's a lot in it. Thank you, Steven. Thank you, Kate, for going back and doing that because, there is a lot of back catalog in there, and it's great. Knowing everything's up to date at Relay.
Mm-hmm. So today we're going to be talking about Freeform. It's, as I put in the show description, it's not every day we get a new productivity app from Apple, but here we are.
Yeah, I was thinking, when was the last one we had? I would argue probably Numbers was the last big one that they released.
Yeah, and that was 2008, I think,
Yeah.
somewhere in there.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. And we've seen those apps come to the iPad and stuff, but like ground up new productivity app from Apple, it's a rare thing. And Freeform for me kind of fits in the old iWork category. Apple doesn't really use iLife and iWork as terms anymore, but it feels very much like a sibling to Pages and Keynote and Numbers. Now, it works and acts. We're going to talk a lot about how it works and acts. There's a lot here to talk about. It works and acts like a modern app in ways that Pages and Numbers and Keynote don't really. But if you're familiar with those apps, I think especially Keynote, a lot of the mechanisms and sort of the tools within Freeform are going to feel really familiar to you. And it's also, I think, closely related to Apple Notes. There's a lot of, I think, cross-pollination there as well. But it's a rare thing. And I remember, when they announced it at WWDC, we were there. I think we both like opened our planning spreadsheet. Like, hey, when Freeform comes out, we're going to get into it. And that's what this episode is. In fact, there's a link in the show notes to a screenshot. This episode, we planned entirely in Freeform. I think people know we normally use Google Docs, but this one completely in Freeform. Like it's a free. We are both looking. I'm looking at a full screen Freeform board right now. So we really kind of did the dog fooding thing this episode, and we have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's great. And, one of the themes of last year, I thought, was kind of the emergence of Apple productivity apps, the remarkable progress they've made with notes and reminders, the beginning of progress with Apple Mail. And now Apple comes out with this Freeform app. So let's just start with the basics. What is this app supposed to do? I mean, you talked about Apple Notes. So Apple Notes is an app that you can write notes in, and you can use your Apple Pencil, but you can also type, and it takes notes. Well, I would argue that there's a ton of overlap between these two apps, but Freeform, I think, is really kind of going at something different. I mean, one of the ways I think of it as is, a whiteboard app that comes out of the age of COVID, where people want to be able to collaborate on ideas, but they don't all sit in the same room with a whiteboard. And I feel like this may have been Apple like scratching its own itch to a certain degree with people staying home. But what if you had a whiteboard where people could be on the phone, but they could all also write on the whiteboard, and there are apps like this already, but this is Apple's version. And one of the things about this app, just kind of talking big picture for me, is it scratches a unique itch that I don't think anybody had really hit on the iPad yet. And that is, and the Mac, frankly, and that is a basic infinite canvas app. And we've talked about this multiple times on the show because I love the idea of infinite canvas where I can start just doodling ideas and let it spread over time. We've talked about, having a whiteboard or a glass board, or even like when I was practicing, I used to get those wall-sized sticky pads, the ones that are like 2 feet by 3 feet, and I just lay it on a desk and I'd write on it with a pencil. So it was almost an infinite canvas for me to write on.
You just wrap all the way around your office and then you come back to where you started.
Yeah, exactly. But using small type, those things are made to be stuck on a wall and like, brainstorm with the team. But I used it individually.
Right.
And I've always liked that. And I've always wanted a digital equivalent of that, And this app really is aimed at that problem, I think, both. And we're going to talk today. We've got notes in the outline about using it collaboratively versus individually, but I think both of those are an option. So I want you to have that in your mind going forward, that this is an app that can be used individually or collaboratively. But it's not really meant to replace Apple Notes. It's meant to give you that kind of that infinite canvas whiteboard, but include the good bits of a computer, like, media import and shapes and all the cool stuff you can do with a computer that you can't do with just a, dry erase and an eraser.
Right.
And I think that's what they're aiming for with this app. And the other thing I would say about this app is kind of a big picture thing is it's got some issues, but it's the first attempt, and I think it's something we need to pay attention to.
I think so too. If there was a theme last year on MPU, I think it was that Apple's productivity apps in particular, while built for the masses, right? They're built for the millions and millions of people who buy an iPhone or an iPad or a Mac each year. They over time have become more powerful and moved upstream in terms of features and how they work and what they can do. And Freeform, I think, fits right into that. There are more powerful whiteboarding, infinite canvas apps out there. We're going to talk about some of them towards the end of the show. But for the people who have never really gotten into this, or they don't need some of those other features, or they want something free, Freeform is a great choice. And I think that Freeform has launched with more features than it would have 5 years ago. Like as the water kind of rises, all the boats get lifted, Freeform kind of comes in at a higher point than it would have, say before Apple Notes got good 5 or 6 years ago, right? It's for a 1.0, it is extremely well featured. And again, we're going to go through all of them. But that's really what jumped out at me is like for a first attempt, this is really solid. And yes, there are features and things that we want, but you don't there was a time I think when like a new Apple's like software application, a 1.0 was way simpler than this, but times have changed and Freeform comes out in an age where we have certain expectations.
Yeah. And I really think that, like I said, this is something that personally I'm excited about this app because I think I'm already finding uses for it. But it's very interesting for me to see Apple come in. I mean, this is not really their usual thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
The iWork suite, word processor, presentation software, spreadsheet. Okay, those are all apps that have been on computers for a very long time. And Apple, brought their unique take to it with the iWork suite. But this is not that. I mean, there is not a flood of infinite canvas style apps out there, especially ones like, pointed the way this one is. And so they really are making an app that is not Sherlocking anybody, in my opinion. I mean, they're just making something that they think would be good in their ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of ecosystem, this app is on iPhone, iPad, and Mac. It syncs across with some caveats we'll be talking about later with sync. Stephen and I working on this outline together was excellent because it gave us a chance to really kind of stress the limits. In fact, you invited some more people into the document too, just to see if we could really grind the gears a bit on this thing.
It's all iCloud based. It's on macOS Ventura 13.1 and iOS and iPadOS 16.2.
Yeah.
You can, I played with this. You can, AirPlay mirror to your television, but I wouldn't mind seeing a tvOS version of this, even if it was sort of read only, right? But then if, several people were, I could see this in my head as I thought about this, like several people around in a meeting room and they're all on their laptops or iPads. And then the Apple TV sort of has a read only version of Freeform that is updating live as people are doing things in the board. To me, that's the only kind of ecosystem piece missing. But like other good software titles these days, it has come to all of these platforms at once. Now, there's nuances and some things work better on some platforms than others, but it's everywhere on day one. It does sync with iCloud, but it's more like Apple Notes than iWork in terms of there's not like an iCloud Drive folder that has all your Freeform boards in it. You're not saving a Freeform board out to your desktop, right? The data is contained within the application like Apple Notes. That doesn't bother me as much as it used to because I've had a really good experience with Apple Notes and so far a really good experience with Freeform in terms of, I haven't lost any data. I haven't had any big issues with it, but it is a little bit different than iWork in that regard.
Yeah, agreed. I think that, and the word sync here has two applications, syncing it between devices and then syncing data between collaborators. And the sync between devices thing has been rock solid for me. Although, interestingly, iCloud Sync was not turned on when I started it. And I'm not sure if this is a beta thing or if that, I haven't checked the public release to see if it is, but you may want to confirm if you try this out that you have iCloud Sync turned on for it on your various platforms, particularly between Mac and iPad, which is where I primarily use this thing. I mean, I've spent a bunch of time with it on iPad and Mac, and on the iPhone, I find this a reference tool more than a working tool. It's pretty hard to work on that little piece of glass. So that's just kind of been my impression.
Organization in this app is relatively simple. You currently cannot make your own folders to save boards within. There's basically 4 categories in the sidebar. You have all boards, recents, shared, and favorites. And, I only have a handful of these at this point, which is fine. But I think as this app grows and matures, that is one thing I would like to see. I'd like to see them bring like Apple Notes or reminder style lists or folders or whatever they want to call it in here. So I could have like MPU boards or personal boards or whatever else in there. I think it's fine for now, but that's one thing I'd like to see them push on a little bit is some of the organization and way that you keep all your boards straight within the application.
Yeah, I'm definitely adopting the mindset of this is a first step and not one of those ship it and forget it apps that Apple used to send out.
Yeah.
It feels to me like this thing. There's a team still working on this. At least I dearly hope so, because I feel like there's a lot of potential with this application. And then I'd mentioned earlier the idea of infinite canvas. Well, what does that mean? I talked about my Post-it note, but infinite canvas digitally means that if you draw to the edge, then you get more edge. There's no limit on the document. And I've like done mind mapping and OmniGraffle where those pages effectively have limits. And then like a lot of the mind mapping and idea generation apps do the same thing where, there's only so much space they're going to render. And there's a bunch of technical reasons for that. But this app does expand. As you get to the edge, it just adds more space. And like I was experimenting with our document, so our document got really big, which is kind of a pain because you open it and you just see a doc grid. You don't even see the stuff we were working on because it's so far over to the left. But it's really nice. So this is effectively an infinite canvas app. You can zoom between 10% to 400%, which means like I like to, when I do handwriting with an Apple Pencil on a document, I like to really zoom in so I can like print or write larger than I normally do. And when you zoom out, it looks nice. So that this app supports that, and they do have, zoom to selection and zoom commands to get you where you want. But this app will grow as far and wide as you want it to. So we got what we were asking for. We got an infinite canvas app.
Yeah. One of the boards I've been building for myself is just a map of my home network. Boy, is that more complicated than I thought it was once I started putting it on paper. But unlike doing it in Notes or Pages or even Keynote, which is probably what I would have used in the past just because I like its layout tools, you don't have to really worry about where you start, right? Like I don't have to worry about, my router is like dead center in this document because that almost doesn't matter. And if you're not familiar with this type of document, it's a little weird to get used to because it does sort of, look, for so long, the concept of a document, like open Microsoft Word, open Google Docs, it's an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, right? Like that, and this infinite canvas concept is so different from that. But once you sort of embrace it, it really kind of unlocks what you can do. So like you can see in the screenshot I put in the show notes, we have our document to the left and a couple of columns. And then I have what I call the attachment testing ground, which is me just like, what does it do with the keynote presentation? What does it do with an MP3? We're going to talk about all that in a second. And I didn't have to think of like, I need to scoot the document to the left to like make room for this on the right, because the app and the document just kind of do what they need to do to make everything fit. And it is weird at first, but pretty cool once you get used to it. This episode of Mac Power Users is made possible by 1Password. Go to 1password.com/MPU to learn more and sign up for a free 30-day trial. You'll get 20% off when you sign up. 1Password is just an excellent app. Of course, you can store and create strong, unique passwords. And of course, it's multi-platform, so those sync between your Mac, iPhone, iPad, PC. And of course, it autofills in multiple browsers and on the Mac, basically anywhere in the system. It's so awesome to have these things everywhere, but it's much more than passwords. You can create secure notes, store your credit card information, even your secure keys. So if you're a developer and you've got a bunch of keys floating around, you can have those in there as well. 1Password is totally baked in to the way that I work. At home, I use 1Password for family so I can share important, critical information with my spouse. And as my kids get older, with them as well. And at Relay FM, we use 1Password for teams. So my partner, Mike Hurley, and I have a vault. We also have a vault that we share with some people who work with us. So our community manager, our VP of sales, they have access to just what they need to get their jobs done. And I can manage all that with fine-grained control. Once again, go to 1password.com/MPU. You can get a free 30-day trial, and you sign up, you get 20% off. Once again, that's 1password.com/MPU.
Before the break, you started talking about different things you can drop into it. So let's just go through the different media types that we can insert into one of these documents. Starting with the basics, PDFs. You can grab a PDF, drag it onto one of these documents, and it just appears on the screen, which is kind of nice, right? You've got PDFs you can drop in, but there are some limitations on what you can do with the PDFs.
Yeah, there's no markup for PDFs, which honestly really surprised me. So in our attachment testing grounds, I put the Xsurf setup guide because I just had it handy and why not?
Yeah,
and
of course you did.
If you open that, it opens a new window, full screen on the Mac, and on iOS and iPadOS, it just takes over the screen. But you can just scroll through the PDF. You can't search in the PDF. You can't mark up the PDF. And that is something I would like to see. It's it'd be so perfect for that. I could have a bunch of PDFs in here, each one its own world of notes within it. But it's basically just a previewer for PDFs at this point.
Can you tell me why there's a note randomly written on here? On MPU 672, David said he would not be buying a new Mac in 2023.
Well, I just want to keep reminding people of what you said.
And then you put right next to it an exploded image of a Mac Studio. I don't know what's going on here, Steve.
I'm just reminding people of the rash vow you took. You think you want to let that go?
Yeah.
So that's PDFs. There are a lot of media file types that basically just play in place on the board. So this is true for audio files. So I tried an MP3, AAC. I tried a bunch of different formats. They all basically just play in place on the board. And same thing with videos and GIFs. And so I dropped in just a QuickTime file of a video I had on my channel last year, and you can just hit play and it just plays it where you are. And same thing with the GIF and again, the audio. And that's pretty sweet. I was surprised that GIF files played. I don't know. Out of all of them, I thought that one may struggle because if you ever opened a GIF in preview, it's hilarious. You just get each frame as its own image. It's that's not at all what I want. But Freeform does it right.
Seems like that one's still on the whiteboard somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that a Freeform joke? Maybe maybe they can have a Freeform board for preview.
There we go.
Yeah. There you go. Another file format that I'm not actually that super familiar with, but someone in Discord recommended that we try it, is the USDZ. These are basically AR files. I have a link in the show notes explaining them. Apple has a bunch of example ones on their website. And it shows up, you get a little preview, but it also shows up in a new window where then you can move your cursor or finger around and see the AR object kind of float in space.
And the general complaint, granted this is a version 1 of this app, is everything, it is displaying this stuff. It's not interactive with this stuff.
Yeah.
Like the PDFs is an obvious example. I mean, you put a PDF in, you've got a whole set of pencil tools. Why wouldn't you want to be able to mark that up? And you can't.
Well, same thing with Keynote documents. It just shows you the still slides. You don't get any of the transitions or anything. You can't play a keynote in it. You just see it as basically like almost like you exported your deck as a PDF.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing they do have that is kind of nice with all of this is it has excellent alignment tools. And this is even more relevant with respect to the shapes. But when you drop the media in, everything snaps. And like this is where you see the keynote and, and pages tool sets being dropped in here because Apple's always had great alignment stuff. And this supports all of that, even with the media you drop in, which is kind of fun, resizing and placing on your board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can distribute, and align. You can group and ungroup. You can combine shapes. A lot of really good tools there. And again, I think those are lifted basically straight out of iWork.
Somebody on the team is like smashing their head against a window right now. I'm sure there's a lot more to it than lifting it out and dropping it in.
Yeah,
it's there.
You just open Xcode and you copy it. I mean, how hard could it?
Copy and paste, right? Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, developer.
The links, another thing in addition to bringing in media types, you can put links in it. And, me being someone who is really into the idea of contextual computing and linking, this is a key feature for me. And I thought for version 1, it's doing good work with linking. So you can put in anything and it creates a link. We had a link to our Google or to our Zoom document to start the show today. I just clicked on it and it brought me in. If you type a link when you're typing text, it just automatically hyperlinks it for you and drops it in, which you can remove. I mean, that's the same thing they do in Apple Notes. I'm sorry, Pages, by the way. If you just type a link, it creates a link.
Yeah.
And so you can see, the iWork stuff kind of bleeding in, but the links are great. And you can apply links to just about anything. Like one of the things I've been playing with is taking some of my work and looking at creating maybe like a status board and, creating links back to things with that. And so I've been having fun playing with that as well. So, I mean, there's just a lot you can do with links in it. And I'm really happy to see this robust link support at version 1.
Yeah. Yeah, it's better than I thought it was initially because I started basically just using the text tool. And I was like, oh, well, let me just hide some text and hit Command K because sometimes in our show notes, I do this a lot if we're linking to apps. I'll just be like, oh, I want the name of the app. Then I just, make the link so I can, when I build the episode in our CMS, I can just click it and open it. And so the Command K shortcut just doesn't exist in Freeform. You can't make a link out of random text, but you can insert a link and that's where you get the nice previews. Like we have a YouTube video here in our Freeform board and it pulls the YouTube thumbnail. You mentioned Zoom. It pulls a little Zoom link. The previews, some are better than others. It seems basically the same as iMessage, but maybe not quite as rich. But you can make really nice graphic links if you need them. And I think for your use case that you mentioned, I think would be really cool.
Yeah, although it does not allow you to attach links to shapes themselves, which I would prefer. I mean, I feel like that. What if you drew a box? Like going back to like the status board example and say I had a duplicated box for each major project I'm working that I could move around almost like a Kanban board. Mm-hmm. I would like the box itself rather than the way I've been using it is the text inside it is the link. But I would prefer the shape itself to be the link. I hadn't tried that. I just tested it here as we're recording and it's not there. So there's something they could work on. Yeah. In addition to links, they have sticky notes. I am not personally a big fan of digital sticky notes. I've never really liked them in PDF annotation. They just get in the way. They cover things up. And I would much rather just do text annotation on the side. That's, my choice. As someone who's read a lot of documents and annotated a lot of documents, I'm not a big fan of sticky notes. I'm not much of a fan of sticky notes here either, but they have them. And, they've got as Apple does, it's got a nice little curl to it with a little shade treatment to the corner, so it looks nice on the page and actually looks like a sticky note. But they're there if you want them. I don't know what else can I say.
The shape library that is included with this app is really impressive. So you get a button up in the toolbar and you can search, which is nice. There are over a dozen categories. So geometry, objects, animals, education, on and on. And there's a ton. I mean, there's hundreds of these, if not thousands of these in here. And you can drag them into your document, change the color. You can put text in them. I mean, there's a scuba diving one. Why is that in here? There's a guy in a canoe. Lots of things. And I haven't come across something yet that I haven't been able to find.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're not SF symbols, which was kind of surprising to me. I thought
blows my mind.
Yeah. These are more detailed shapes. Like, just for instance, I was looking at the buildings. We've got like an observatory. We got the usual buildings and multiple houses, restaurants, lighthouses, the Roman Colosseum. So, they've got like a lot of different things. And interesting about those shapes is those shapes are editable. I don't know if you tried this, Stephen, but if you put one in, like I'm going to try and put the castle in here. You can go through and enable it so you can actually edit individual points on the shape. So you can actually transform shapes into new shapes too. So it's really cool. And an interesting, another experiment on the SF symbols thing is that you can grab an SF symbol if you've got the SF symbols app and you can paste them in, but it is pasted in as text as SF symbols do. So it treats it as a text field. And then all you have to do is go through and, fiddle with the size, to get it bigger. And interestingly, on that point, you can create a link to text. So an SF symbol can have a link attached to it. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah, that goes back to our notes and reminders conversation. Like SF symbols should just be everywhere. And they're like this obscure, mostly developer only thing. And I'd like for Apple to have those available in apps like this.
Did you ever see that Seinfeld episode with the soup Nazi?
Of course.
I feel like maybe there's like an SF symbols Nazi at Apple. Like people like come and say, well, I want to put SF symbols in my app. Like, I know, no SF symbols for you. No.
1 year. Come back to the next WWDC.
Yeah, exactly. Or you get 5.
Yeah.
You get 5. Pick them.
That's right. Yeah, that's what happens to the reminders team. It's like, you get this many. Good luck.
Oh, yeah, that is shocking to me because I've been doing more reminder stuff for the labs, and it is just shocking to me how few symbols they have in there. Mm-hmm. And why do they always have like 8 different symbols related to sports?
I know.
And like 1 related to work.
I know. I was like, oh, good. Here's my soccer list. Here's my basketball list. I don't get it either. I don't get it either. I do want to talk about text entry. Obviously, we did a lot of text entry in our board because we work off an outline. This, to me, was the most frustrating element of working with Freeform because this is not the standard text input field you get in other Mac applications. On iOS, I'm much more forgiving of this. But on the Mac, it's been actually, honestly, kind of frustrating to work with large amounts of text in here. We mentioned that the Command K, like any text become a link, just isn't there. You kind of got to do it through this weird insert workflow. But bulleted lists are just maddening in this application to me.
Yeah.
There's no way to manage them with the keyboard beyond indenting and outdenting. You can't stop or create a list with a keyboard shortcut. And there's not, so Apple Notes has this problem too, to a degree, but in Apple Notes, bulleted lists and number lists are an option in the menu, so you can make your own keyboard shortcuts. That is not here on the Mac. And it doesn't do the very common thing where like you do 2 returns and it brings you out of the bulleted list. That's not here either. So I was like making bulleted list when I really wanted blank lines. I would like to see all of this be more mature and robust. I don't know how many boards are going to be as text heavy as ours is, but ours I found to be pretty limiting.
Yeah, another problem I hit was when I was putting the outline together, it creeps up. It doesn't just write down, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the text box like slowly moves away from you.
Yeah, exactly. It moves up and down at the same time, like it's like locking in center. And so like I put the title at the top and then I'd work for a while and then the text box would overlap the title. I'd have to physically move it down. And it just seems like when you're writing text, I think generally we don't want the top to literally move on the page.
Yeah.
And this just feels to me like this needs work. I mean, you had a note in here about the over aggressive autocorrect. I completely agree.
Yeah, it's uber aggressive. Again, I get it on the iPhone and iPad, but on the Mac, like give me the more standard Mac things. For instance, any word that is a contraction, so like the word won't, it would automatically like add a space after the apostrophe, thinking it's a single quote. And it's like, no, that's almost never what I want. And the last thing I'll say about the text in particular is copying and pasting text between text boxes doesn't always bring the formatting with it. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I bundled all this up in a feedback to Apple. It's feedback 1190 1499. So if you work on this, go check out my feedback. I put all this in a single piece of feedback because Apple obviously has the text tools to make this better. I think if I had to guess, the reasoning for this is they want it to be the same across platforms, and I don't disagree with that. But on the Mac in particular, there's a lot of text entry features that users are used to that just aren't here that I think should be.
Yeah, and frankly, I don't agree with that. I think that the pencil features could be better on an iPad than they are on the Mac, and the text features could be better on the Mac than they are on the iPad. I mean, you should play to the strengths of the platform.
Yeah.
Because if I put one of these documents on a Mac, it's usually because I want to use the Mac stuff. And if I put it on an iPad, I want to use the iPad stuff. So, but again, this is a first go at this. So I'm forgiving. If next year these kinds of things don't improve, I'll be a lot more disappointed than I am at this point. I'm just happy now that the damn thing exists. But switching over input methods to the Apple Pencil, we've talked for a long time about how the iPad is a solution without a problem kind of thing in terms of the apps and what does it give me that you don't get from a Mac, and this kind of stuff is what it is great at, and using the Apple Pencil. With some caveats from later aside, it really is nice being able to have this whiteboard, particularly on my big iPad that I keep on my desk, kind of the secondary display. I find myself increasingly pulling it down and laying it, in front of my keyboard and working on the pencil on some of these boards. And having that there always is just great. And I talked about at the beginning of the show, I'm a visual thinker. I've always liked having these kinds of things to write on. And this is the best digital version of that I've seen, or at least it could be, I think, with a little more work.
We do need to talk about what we have dubbed the text drift bug.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, and I agree with you, like you zoom in really far on the iPad, you write something with the Apple Pencil. Over time, that seems to really break down. So we have an image in the show notes. And again, I have submitted this to Apple, but you had written MPU 673 outline with the Apple Pencil. And over time, that has become illegible because, for instance, the 6 and 7, the 7 kind of marched over and like joined 6 and now is behind 6. And you can't even read outline because the letters, again, over time have slowly drifted together where it's not even legible.
It's not even that's even. It's like, it's worse because like components of the letters have drifted. Like an outline OUT, the cross on the T moved, but the vertical member of the T remained. So it looks like we lean. I don't know what it's. I opened it up because I wrote this a week ago, and I opened up a few days later, and I'm like, was I drunk when I wrote this? I mean, my handwriting is better than that, surely. And I realized, oh no, just individual components of the letters are just starting to move around the page. And it seems like it's gotten worse. And, then like I took a screenshot at one point and I put it in the document, and now I'm looking at it and it's a completely different problem now. Like it's like, is there something going on here with the Apple Pencil based character set where things just move? And I will say I've been using this also individually without collaboration, and I have not experienced this problem. So And I don't, and you and I are pushing it hard. We're open on multiple platforms. So earlier today, I had it open both on the iPad and the Mac at once. But honestly, I think that should be expected, and that should not break it. I'm looking now. I see now that cross on the E at the end of outline has now moved like a half an inch to the right, but the rest of the E is where it started. So now the old E looks like a C.
Yeah.
It's very strange. And so there's obviously work to be done. The Apple Pencil's great, but when the text drift problem starts in, you're really out of luck. I don't know what you do at that point.
And that's really the worst outright bug that I've seen.
Yeah.
But it is kind of funny. It's like
yeah. I mean, but there's another section of our document where I wrote Apple Pencil notes. And everything in there has completely kept its fidelity. Like I said, zooming in, you should zoom in. There's a great set of pen selection tools. And then I said, compare with the GoodNotes tool set. It's not nearly as good as the GoodNotes tool set. It doesn't even, the ink method isn't as good. It doesn't have the thing where you can write big and it shows up small. There's a bunch of stuff that GoodNotes does. This is probably never going to do.
Yeah.
But if you look at that note, at least on my board, it is completely within the original thing. My guess is that the title, because we've had the text box rolling over it so much, and it's probably been re-rendering a lot. I'm sure it's a bug, but some of the pencil stuff has been fine, but others of it has comically gone awry.
Yeah. The other bug that I've seen with iPad handwritten text is that when you select one of those items on the Mac, the app will crash. Like you'll get the beach ball and then it dies. Again,
yeah.
So in the show notes, I have all my feedback numbers. So you can go look at those if those are relevant to you. But there's something kind of weird with this iPad text. Maybe it's the collaboration and maybe it's that, you're dealing with it on the Mac, but those are obviously problems, but I don't want to dwell on them too much because, again, it is a 1.0, and I think overall this app is very good. But we do need to point out where we see problems.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Rocket Money. Head to rocketmoney.com/MPU and cancel unwanted subscriptions and manage your expenses. If your New Year's goal is to manage your budget better and save money, you need Rocket Money. Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill, is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills all in one place. Over 80% of people have subscriptions they forgot about, like that streaming service you bought to watch just one show on, or that free trial that you never even used. Rocket Money will quickly and easily identify your subscriptions for you so you can stop paying for ones you don't want. You know that Apple feature that goes through your App Store subscriptions and shows them to you and makes it really easy to cancel them? Well, that's what Rocket Money is, but for your whole life. And canceling subscriptions with Rocket Money is as easy as a click of a button. Just find the subscription you don't want and press cancel, and Rocket Money will cancel it for you. There's no more long hold times with customer service or tedious emailing back and forth. They just handle it. Over 3 million people have used Rocket Money, saving on average per person $720 per year. So I signed up for Rocket Money and put my relevant data in there and let it grind away, and it found a bunch of subscriptions I didn't know that I still had. For instance, I was still paying monthly money to Adobe that I didn't even realize. There were a bunch of things like that on my accounts, and I went through and used Rocket Money to get rid of all of that. I ended up saving $150 a month just with about a half hour in the application. Rocket Money made it super easy, make the connections, and let it do the work for you. I was super impressed, and now I'm a believer. So stop throwing your money away. Cancel unwanted subscriptions and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/MPU. That's ROCKETMONEY.com/MPU. rocketmoney.com/MPU. Our thanks to Rocket Money for the support of the Mac Power Users and all of Relay FM.
So let's talk about collaboration as well as exporting. I think those kind of go hand in hand in my mind. This sharing is really easy and very, very similar to Apple Notes in terms of the mechanisms. So you go to share it. You can select a person. You can change their access. So you can have it where only invited people can access the board and they can make changes. You can make it view only. You can make a public link. So say you had one of these for your company, you could have that link sent to everybody, but no one can write it. It's only read only. Pretty robust. And then you can share it via messages, mail, copy the link again, a bunch of different methods. Very similar to Apple Notes, like I said.
Yeah, and it was really easy getting this set up, and we have been collaborating fairly successfully. I mean, this is not going to replace Google Docs for us. Next week we'll be back in our usual platform, but we were able to, prep today's show within this platform. And honestly, if we were going to use an Apple platform to do show notes, it would be Apple Notes. It wouldn't be this anyway.
Yeah.
This is meant to be kind of that big whiteboard more than it's meant to be. We're kind of using it out of scope a little bit, I think.
I think so. But that's okay. We gotta push on these things as Mac Power users. This does lead to a tangent that I need to go down. So the little glyph, we've all seen it. It's a box with an upward arrow. It's sharing this board. It's export. It's a bunch of things in a bunch of different applications. There's been conversation on other relay shows about what we call this. And it seems like the term is sharo. So like share and arrow put together. And I just want to know what you think about that word. Is that something that you like?
Well, I mean, Merlin is really pushing the sharo term.
Yes.
And Merlin, I really love that guy. So if it makes Merlin happy, then I have to go along with sharo. Although I have always thought of it as just a sharing box. And I've never verbalized it. I think I've ever written it down. But I always thought it's a sharing box. It's a box that has an arrow out of it. But sharo, I mean, if that's what makes you happy.
Yeah.
It is tough, like when you're talking to relatives on the phone and trying to walk them through something. What do you say? Because that's something you often want them to press is the sharo. What do you tell them? Historically, before this all started.
Box with the upward arrow. Like I just describe it.
Yeah, so that's what I have always done too. I'm not sure that like my cousin would understand if I said sharo, right? But as a nerd term, I'm all in.
Yeah. Okay.
What are your thoughts?
I basically agree. Merlin is a smart guy, and he's pushing this. So, but I think with the the regular people in our life, that word makes no sense. That's the problem with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Merlin is the guy who invented Inbox Zero, which everybody has like adopted.
Yeah. And abused, probably.
And abused. Yeah. I hope that his experience with sharo is better than his experience has been with Inbox Zero.
There you go. There you go. When you are collaborating, it's so like right now, you and I are both looking at this board. I see a little picture of David Sparks up there, uses my image for you. Times that I've been looking at the board and you haven't been there, you don't show up. So you can kind of see who's there. Very similar to Google Docs or Google Sheets. And you see their cursor kind of. So it's different than Google Docs or Apple Notes where like if you're in between two words, I see like a cursor beam and like your little photo or your name or your color or whatever it is. Here, basically, you get brackets kind of showing what object you're working with. So right now I'm going to select the big Mac Power User artwork and put it at the top of the document. At some point, you should see little bounding boxes showing that that's the object I'm interacting with. I think that's enough. I don't think it needs to be much more granular than that. Again, I think we're using this app in a much more text-heavy way than most people will. But you get a sense of what people are working with, which is good, kind of where they are in the document.
Yeah, and it is not as collaborative real-time as something like Google Docs. There is a slight delay I've seen, and it's just not the same thing. It does a lot more than Google Docs. You can't draw on the screen with Google Docs, right? So they've got a bigger thing to deal with, and it's the first version. But it's collaborative, I think, enough.
Yeah.
Like I was thinking as you were saying that, maybe we should do a show one day in Apple Notes, just out of curiosity to see how fast it is. Because that's always been kind of the thing. The reason we use Google Docs is I can literally watch you type something in.
Yeah.
which can be helpful when you're recording. I don't know. I know Apple Notes continues to improve, but I haven't really stressed it in that way lately.
Yeah, well, and with Ventura 13.1 and iOS 16.2, they made it was basically non-documented. I only found out about it because there was a post that was going around from like an Apple Notes engineer on Mastodon. This is the world we live in now. It was like, oh yeah, we sped up collaboration and notes, but like, no one knew. And so we should revisit that. That's a change since our notes and reminders episode, which was just like a month ago.
What about export?
Export is really basic. So you can get a PDF. you can, of course, you can print it. But the export as PDF option, you basically just name it and it generates a PDF based on the size and layout of your board. And so our board is pretty horizontal because we have these different columns that you can go see in the show notes. And so it makes a PDF basically just as big as you need it. So this is an infinite canvas app, but the PDF you get is basically sized and shaped based on your board, which I think is a pretty good way of doing it. I don't have a better idea, but you do get some sort of funnily shaped PDFs. So one of my test boards I did in preparation for this, I made a very long vertical board just to like see what would happen. And the PDF is long and vertical.
Yeah, I can simplify this. Just think about this board, your board in Freeform as a Maserati going 200 miles an hour. And think about the 8.5 by 11-inch sheet of paper in your printer as a reinforced block wall. And what happens is your Maserati, the bigger your infinite canvas is, the faster it's going, hits that wall, and it's a mess. This thing is really not meant to be printed, in my opinion. It's really there as a live document feature. Although you can print, I don't think they put a lot of effort into it, and I don't think a lot of people are going to be printing these things.
I don't think so either. This is a digital tool more than anything else.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some uses for this. How are people using it in these early days, and where do we see it fitting? And to begin with, I definitely want to draw a line between collaborative and individual work, because I feel like some of the problems we're hitting with this version 1 is sync errors, like the text drift, and some of the issues we hit where, you and I are working on the same text at the same time or something, and we run into conflicts. I feel like that is something that is going to get worked out. But I think that is a limitation on collaborative stuff. I was curious. I want to get some, maybe you and I will do some show planning with a collaborative, more traditional use of the application. The text drift thing to me is really a big problem. And I think it's a early version bug that will go away. But, if it's going to be a whiteboard app, the places that you draw on the whiteboard need to be respected, and the squiggles with your pen need to stay where you put them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you wrote something in red next to the title, next to where you have the Mac Power Users logo, and that has drifted on me, and I have no idea whatever you were trying to write there. But
yeah, I think what I was trying to write was that I wanted to capitalize the second F in Freeform, like make it camel case.
Yeah.
That's not the way that it is, but I can't read it because the text is all bananas.
Yeah, it's drifted. So that's a huge issue for me with the collaborative stuff. But what I would recommend is just try it with a few friends and just kind of see where it goes. And I really have faith that Apple will fix that. Where a few years ago I may not have. It's like a few years ago I think, well, they shipped it, so that means the team is broken up into 100 pieces and everybody's working on other projects, and that's that. But I don't think that's the case anymore. So I feel like that's going to get fixed. But I would encourage you to think of it generically in terms of like, is this a collaborative tool, and is this an individual tool? How can I use it in these two ways? Me personally, I have collaborated with this with Steven. I'm in the process of building some workflow diagrams for the people on Team Mac Sparky. Like, what do we do in getting a labs video published? What parts do I do? What parts do Liana do, or whatever? And how does it get on YouTube and get out to the world? And I thought it would be fun to like just diagram that and just kind of see where the bottlenecks are and how we make it better. and I'm going to share that with the team. And this is going to be a board, and everybody can go in and look at it and see visually how it works, and we can make changes and annotate them on the board. I expect that's going to work because it's going to be some basic shapes, some handwriting, some text, but it's not going to be anything nearly as complex as what we've done with this outline. And I think that is a good collaborative use. It just gives everybody a place to go. And while I like other apps out there in the world, I think for this type of thing, this will be great. And I love the collaborative nature that people can also weigh in and kind of have an opinion on it. So that's another use I'm looking at it collaboratively. But I mean, I think the big use is to get on a Zoom call or whatever and just open a board and start working through it and let people kind of like annotate and add to it as we talk through it and make everybody feel like they can do something. I guess this could lead to some sort of anarchy. I mean, normally when you're in a physical meeting, only one person is at the whiteboard at a time. So, you can see the obvious problem if everybody's writing at once. But I think this would be I think that's the primary intended use of this app.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. For me, I mean, obviously we have this document. I mentioned that I'm doing one for my home network just because I've never done a topography of it, and I think it would be a useful thing to have. I've got some other documents floating around. I think they're all in Keynote, probably, of like signal flow stuff. So like when we record a live show, it's obviously very different than a regular recording, and I've got different equipment, and that is something I basically want to pick up and remake in Freeform. I think the tools would be better suited to that. So when we do live shows again, I can have that handy. And I think for all the collaboration talk, like you said, I think there is a real use case for that sort of solo use, right? Like a status board or just internal planning. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I have always been playing with this idea of a status board where I can go and look at visually everything I'm working on and where it is. It's kind of a derivative of the Kanban board. Over the years, I've done them with MindNode. I've done it with OmniGraffle. I've been playing with it in here, and it's a fun experiment. Like I said, the inability to link shapes does hurt it for me a little bit here. But I was thinking about this. You know how a lot of us use Keynote as a graphics tool?
Mm-hmm.
Like you open Keynote, sometimes you have no intention of ever getting a presentation.
Exactly.
But you want something that can give you basic shapes that can use Apple's alignment guides and like pull something together quickly. I think this is definitely a disruptor for that feature. Like just working on these workflow diagrams for my team with our publication workflows. This is great, and it does everything that Keynote does. It's got a really nice shape collection. I do wish that they had SF symbols built in, but I have a way to bring them in. And I think this is going to disrupt that a little bit, where you can now do this without having to go into Keynote, which has always been kind of a weird, thing to go to your presentation app to draw your diagrams, right?
Yeah, right. But we all did it. It was the best tool Apple had.
But Keynote never had an infinite canvas, which meant, your diagram, like you were talking about earlier, where is the diagram centered on the page? Well, that's no longer relevant. And if you add more to your diagram, if you're like talking about your home network, if you decide to go deeper with it, or if you want to like put reference notes on the page, you can grow the page to whatever size you need, and you've just got it all there.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you got a big screen on your Mac and you just make it full screen, it's kind of gorgeous to look at this thing there with all the details you need, visual as well as text. I mean, it's pretty good for that stuff.
Yeah.
So on the individual use stuff, I've been playing with the status guide. I've got big plans for the year, as I always do, about what I want to publish and get out. And I'm working on Obsidian now, but the next field guide after that, I've already started up as a board. And I think that might be a good way to like kind of think through some big picture things. I mean, eventually this stuff gets into other platforms as I start actually producing things, but this is a whiteboard, and I can share it with some friends and people that, can give me advice on what they think about things. And so that's kind of cool. It just is a basic diagramming tool. And honestly, all I ever really need is basics. I find it very effective on an individual basis. And I do like the ability to pick up an iPad and play with it there as well. I don't use it on the Mac. at all effectively. I was testing it I'm sorry, I don't use it on the iPhone at all effectively. I was testing it for today's show. Yeah, it works. That's great. But I don't see that I'm ever going to really use this much on the iPhone.
Yeah, same.
So there's collaborative and individual uses. So I think the trick is, if you're interested in this new app, is think about it in that context. Are there some collaborative stuff I can try with this? Is there stuff that I want to just do individually? I just want to have I want to have that big sticky note that Dave used to talk about. And can I, do something effectively with that? Well, I think so. I mean, the only thing I miss about that, though, is there's something to be said for that big screen. What was it? I was watching one of those movies with my kids, the one where everybody has to kill each other. What's that called?
Hunger Games?
Hunger Games. Yeah, right. There's a scene where she's in the big city and there's a wall-sized monitor and it looks like she's in the woods, And so basically in the future, our walls are just big screens. And I would love that for something like this, like just to have a big screen with my diagrams on them where I can sit here and draw on them anytime I want on the wall, right? So like a whiteboard the size of a wall. And this, the limitation of this for that function is the size of your display. We talked about how the iPhone is no good for this. Well, an 11-inch iPad's okay. 13-inch iPad's a little better. 27-inch monitor is pretty great, but you can't use a pencil on it. I feel like, the size limitation is a constraint here that you need to kind of think your way through if you're going to try and do this as opposed to a traditional whiteboard.
Yeah, I think that's well said. One feature, and I think an important part of this app that we haven't really touched on yet, is some of the accessibility stuff. And I kind of put this here because if you're doing one of these for just yourself, maybe it's not that important. But if you're collaborating or if you're sharing this widely, I think you should take the time, and each object in a board can have a description. And the Mac, it's in the right-click menu. On mobile, it's in the little ellipses menu. And you can set a description for VoiceOver to read. And so if someone is using this, say like here, I've got this screenshot of the collaboration menu that I took on the Mac and I just dropped it in this board. I would go into the description and say, screenshot of the share menu or share if Merlin's reading it, and describe what it is. I really like that this is built into the 1.0. It's really easy to get to. It's very simple to do. And I think if you're sharing this with a large group of people, it should be just part of your workflow, because this is a visual medium. Like, we have a lot of text in here, but like we've said, I think most boards won't. And so having descriptions makes this accessible, makes your work accessible to everybody. And I was thrilled to discover that feature while using this app. This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by Electric. When leading your small business, it's not all glamorous. In fact, sometimes it's a matter of spending hours trying to find that laptop that got lost in the mail for your new hire out of town, or dealing with some other technical emergency. Maybe you spilled orange juice on your own computer. You're well equipped to deal with all this, but you probably don't have the time anymore. The team over at Electric knows small businesses, maybe like yours, face these challenges. That's why they've solved this problem for you by operating as your IT department. So instead of spending hours sorting through unused application licenses, setting up laptops for new employees, and answering never-ending IT questions, you can focus on building your business. With Electric acting as your IT department, you can get back to what you're good at. Plus, you get a really cool IT platform to see and manage everything. Delegation is so important in a small business, and especially with IT stuff where things are changing all the time, you really want an expert to be able to help you out. And with Electric, you get a whole team of them. For MPU listeners, Electric is offering a free pair of Beats Solo 3 headphones for taking a qualified meeting. Just go to electric.ai/MPU. That's electric.ai/MPU. Go get yourself a free pair of Beats Solo 3 headphones for scheduling a meeting. Our thanks to Electric for their support of the show.
Okay, so we've been talking about Freeform now for an hour. Let's talk about where it works and where it doesn't. Where is Freeform excel? What do you like about it?
Yeah, I love that it's built in and that it really, with some caveats we mentioned earlier, really does a good job with attachments. So you can have this board that is home to images and like all this mixed media stuff. I think Freeform has done really well. Yes, I'd like to see some more tools with PDFs, etc. But for 1.0, for being free and built in, I think it does a great job with that, and it makes it really easy to make these really rich, good looking, like mixed media boards. Like I think in the near future, we're going to see people see examples of this. And if you have these, like share them in our forum of really honestly like beautifully designed, really nice looking freeform boards. And
Yeah.
a lot of these tools don't put a huge emphasis on aesthetics. I think freeform has like, and I'm looking forward to seeing what people can do with those. Like you can go in and you can hide the grid, for instance. Like I like the grid as like a visual alignment thing, but you can even turn that off and you can have options for guides and center guides and edge guides and stuff. I think seeing what people can make with this visually is going to be really exciting. I think Freeform's done a good job with that.
I agree. But I would say that they don't have to be beautiful. They can be ugly and help you too.
Oh,
you know?
yeah. No. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But I really think one of the things that we see, I think it's a win that this app exists. I think it represents a lot of goodness to me in terms of the way Apple is thinking these days. Like, I'm not sure this app would have been approved or released a few years ago.
Yeah.
I just feel like, but somebody in Apple felt like this was a problem that needed to be solved. There wasn't a good solution and said, we can do this. And as a platform owner, we can do it in ways that nobody else can. And it's a little rough around the edges at the beginning here, but I feel like they're going to put some effort into this thing. And over time, it's going to become just as useful as notes and reminders and the stuff we've been praising over the last, year.
Mm-hmm.
So I really, the fact that Apple would make an app like this, to me, it's a good sign.
Yeah.
It doesn't need work, absolutely, but I think it fills a void that has existed on their platforms, and I think it's going to become useful. Now, what void does it fill? I guess is the question. I mean, there are other apps out there that do things like this, and I was thinking, well, how does it compare to them? MindNode comes to mind. MindNode is my favorite mind mapping app. I use it all the time. They sponsored my blog, I think, last year at some point. So, I mean, I have a little bit of relationship with them, but I still feel like MindNode is the best app to go to make mind maps. We just talked about this recently on the show. But I feel like this is not that. MindNode auto-generates, auto-sorts, puts everything together for you. That is not what this is. This is much more of a free-form style of diagramming. It's really meant for you to kind of just pull it all together yourself instead of having an app do it for you. I wouldn't be doing mind mapping in this, but I wouldn't be doing diagramming in MindNode. So I really feel like they're kind of similar but different.
Yeah.
The obvious, comparison is Apple Notes, but we kind of already talked about that. Apple Notes is a notes app, and this is a diagramming app. Yeah, Apple is a notes app with diagramming features, and this is a diagramming app with notes features.
There you go.
If that makes sense.
That makes a ton of sense. I think Concepts is another application that people look at in this arena. Concepts has a lot more robust sketching and drawing tools. The sketching and drawing tools in Freeform are basically what you get in Apple Notes. Like it's Apple's pencil kit. You see it in a lot of apps. Concepts, I think, has really grown into a more of an art-focused application. And you can definitely do some other things in it. But when I think of Concepts and when I check it out, it's kind of in my list of apps that I check out every couple of years. It's more art-focused than ever, I think.
Yeah, and see, for me, Freeform replaced Concepts.
Interesting.
I was using Concepts to do Freeform style stuff, except Concepts didn't have syncing. They've been promising it. I know they're working on it, but I just had on one iPad, I had Concepts, and that's where I would do diagrams like this. But the drawing tools and Concepts, well, it was way more than I needed. It was like, I just needed the most basic of tools, and they're giving me very advanced drafting tools. So what I would prefer is syncing basic drawing tools and the auto layout stuff. So, Freeform really scratches the itch for me that Concepts never quite got.
Yeah.
So I feel like there is definitely competition between those two in the way I was using Concepts. Now, if you're using Concepts to draw manga, and you're not going to be going over to Freeform anytime soon.
Mhm.
But for this kind of basic diagramming stuff, I think that Freeform is an excellent option.
Yeah. I think GoodNotes is another obvious competitor. It won the iPad App of the Year from Apple in 2022. GoodNotes is fantastic. It gives you more robust organization. I talked about that earlier in the show. But it syncs. It does collaboration. It has a lot of nice drawing tools. Again, kind of beyond what Apple does. But I think in a lot of ways, GoodNotes is honestly maybe the closest. And if GoodNotes has felt like overkill, maybe this can meet your needs. And I think if Freeform isn't quite enough for you, I would say look at GoodNotes next.
Yeah, I agree. But to me, really, the central focus of Freeform is this idea of shared whiteboard and diagramming. Whereas I feel like the central focus of GoodNotes is a digital notebook.
Yeah.
And so those are kind of different things. If you're coming at it as a digital notebook, I don't think Freeform is going to make you happy. One of the tools GoodNotes has that Freeform doesn't, that I'm kind of surprised isn't here, but maybe it'll show up, is like in GoodNotes, and even Apple Notes does this now. When you like draw a circle and you just hold it there, it like turns it into a proper circle.
Mm-hmm.
Freeform doesn't do that. If you draw a circle, it just your ugly circle at the end. It doesn't like kind of fix it for you. Although with the shape support, I guess you wouldn't need it, but I feel like that's a miss for Freeform. Tinderbox is an app on the Mac, which I don't think we talk about enough. It is kind of one of the original kind of open thinking apps. It's been around a long time, and it's Mac only, but it's very good. But I feel like kind of the diagramming and thinking kind of stuff like that, this is similar to Tinderbox, although Tinderbox is very mature and has a lot more features.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Tinderbox may be the pro version of this if you were on the Mac only. But I don't think, Apple's ever going to approach Tinderbox's feature set. But, Tinderbox is on the Mac, Analog tools, I think this is a competitor to maybe most competitive is analog tools, an actual whiteboard, an actual big sticky pad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the kind of stuff this is really engineered to do. And those do have some advantages in that the screen is as big as the medium, whereas on this stuff, you've got that little window.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And I think for a lot of people who carry an iPad and Apple Pencil in particular, just the ability to like open a board and sketch something out really quickly or diagram something really quickly, Freeform is going to be hard to beat there. And, I think this is particular too with the iPad mini, sort of this like digital device that's roughly book shaped and sized. Like Freeform could be killer for a lot of those uses. And if you've done this like in a paper notebook, like I still to this day carry a paper notebook in my front left pocket. And if I flip through them, historically, there are sketches and other things in there. If those things need to be shared with somebody, Freeform is going to be how I'm going to do it. Like even me as someone who likes these analog tools, Freeform is going to eat into them a little bit, I think.
Yeah. And just as you were talking, I opened up Freeform to full screen, and I'm looking at today's show outline in full screen.
Mm-hmm.
It looks awesome. Yeah. It really does.
It's cool.
And like even like when you and I were talking about text drift before we recorded the show, I was dropping in screenshots, and in real time they were showing up on your screen. There's a lot to like about this app.
Yeah, there really is. We do though have some ideas for improvements we would like to see.
Yeah.
I again would harp on the text entry. That would be better and faster, especially in large text boxes. So like our show notes actually have broken into several text boxes, but when it was all one big one, and when you were in the document as well, I ran into real slowdowns. Like I would be typing and the app would be letters or words behind me. That's not a good feeling.
No. It's like old Microsoft Word stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's two categories of room for improvement. Number one is there's some basic features that are a little buggy at release that needs to become the priority, right? Text entry needs to be more solid. Text drift which it's not even text drift, it's drawing drift is really what we should be calling it. But this idea that you write with a pencil and strokes with your pen are going to change location relative to where you drew them, that's not good. That's got to get fixed. I mean, because that's a key feature of the app. So we've got some stuff here that I think needs to like immediately get fixed, and hopefully people are working on that. But then I think there's also a group of features where it's just like stuff that hasn't been implemented that I think should be. Number one, maybe for me, is better linking. I mean, we praise the linking about how it auto generates, but every object should be linkable.
Yeah.
There should just be, when you right click on anything, add link should be an option.
Totally agree. That would be absolutely fantastic. Something else I like to see is faster diagramming and outlining. I'm not saying go out and Sherlock MindNote, but if you want to create those sort of, mind maps in that style, I think that could be a real boon to Freeform, and doing that quickly with like keyboard shortcuts or on the iPad or on the iPhone, dragging them over and sort of auto linking of boxes and that sort of thing. I'd like to see more of.
Yeah, they call that magnetic connections.
Yes.
You see it in OmniGraffle. You see it in a lot of good diagramming apps, and it's not in this one, which we've been calling a diagramming app for over an hour. So I feel like those need to be there. So what that means, if I draw an arrow and connect it to a box and I move the box, the arrow follows the box.
Right.
And that doesn't happen right now, which is, it's something that needs to be there. I'm not sure it had to be there at version 1, but I feel like it needs to be there eventually. And sooner rather than later, the markup for PDF. I mean, you called this out, but it's so true, right? If I'm going to drop a PDF in this thing, I want to be able to work on it as well. Now, granted, you can go outside and work in another app, but that kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah. I'd like to see that get more robust. All in all, though, while there are issues in this application, I'm very pleased with it as a 1.0. I think that it's surprisingly solid and feature complete. I really think that Apple in the pandemic came across a need for this internally, and they built their own tool and they released it. Like I don't know that, but I'm pretty confident that's what happened. Like someone in Apple wanted this for themselves, and then they built the tool they wanted and needed. And honestly, those are the best projects, from any sort of company or creator. And I think it shows in this. I think it shows that people who put this together really care about it. And I do hope they continue to push on it and grow it. But I am very happy with where it is today as a 1.0.
Yeah. I mean, its existence is a win. This is a tool I could become really devoted to, so long as, Apple lets a passionate group of developers. I don't even think it needs to be a particularly large team, but just a group of people who are passionate about this to go in and just keep making it better. And I really hope that's the case. And recent history tends to lean that direction. Like if you look at what's happening with their other productivity apps. So and is this, I guess another question is this part of a bigger trend? I mean, with Apple, you only see the parts they're showing you. But maybe, was there a decision 4 or 5 years ago to say, you know what, we're going to really turn up productivity. Not only are we going to fix the stuff we have, we're going to build a whole new suite of things that are relevant to people in the modern age, and one of those is a diagramming whiteboard app. So maybe that'll be the first one that goes out, but maybe there's more in the pipeline. Is that something that could be happening right now?
Yeah, I hope it is. And I think it is. I think Apple wants to make their built-in stuff reach more people and be flexible for those of us who want more than what the masses need. And so I share your enthusiasm and your positive outlook on all of these tools. I think we look, again, notes and reminders, Safari, like all of these tools, even Mail got new features. Like, I think they're taking this seriously, and I'm excited that it's cross-platform and like all that stuff. So yeah, I think the future here is bright. I don't think this app is going to sit for 3 years without any changes. I think we're going to get stuff every year.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of on the verge. I mean, the evidence certainly leans toward Apple, wanting to improve their productivity situation. I think this year's WWDC will be a very big event in that sense, where if we see additional features in Mail and improvements to Freeform and even, reminders and notes, I think that's going to be more than just, an inkling. That's just going to be kind of proof that, yeah, this is actually in progress right now. I mean, just regular improvement. So anyway, it's pretty exciting. Listen, if you haven't tried Freeform, it's on your devices. It came with the latest update. So go ahead, load it up. Let me know what you think about it. You can also weigh in on the forums. We got a thread for each show. I'd love to see how the Mac Power users are implementing this. Honestly, selfishly, I want to see what you guys are doing. Maybe there's something I can use it for as well.
Mhm.
But I feel like this app is going to be a part of my workflow, and we're drawing on it with the iPad and seeing this big display with it. Man, it's pretty nice, gotta say.
Yeah.
Either way, we're the Mac Power users. You can find us at relay.fm/MPU. Thank you to our sponsors today, 1Password, Rocket Money Electric, and Happy New Year, everybody. Steve and I are doing a lot of work getting the show ready for 2023. We love having you here, and we'll see you next week.